With that remote access role now installed onto our machine, the first thing we want to do is configure some VPN settings. And in fact, there's a nice little wizard here in the tool that makes this process fairly easy to set up. If I come down here under Tools and take a look at Remote Access Management, we can go through this initial wizard to get one of the variety of different kinds of VPNs set up here within the Remote Access Management console. That's up here under Direct Access and VPN. Now, coming up in our next module, we're going to explore direct access, which, unlike the traditional VPNs and unlike the routing bits that we were talking about earlier, direct access is a really cool technology that you may actually implement in your environment. But before we get there, we want to explore just a bit some of these VPN and other types of settings that exist here in the Remote Access Management console. And so let's go through actually running the Remote Access Setup wizard here and deploy just for now the VPN only. We'll come back later and install direct access as well. Here, when we're deploying VPN only, we're going to create a situation whereby our clients can then connect up to this server in order to access the resources that exist on our network. And as you can see here, when I click the link, what it does is essentially make available Remote One as a remote access server and gives me this nice little picture here for configuring the clients here on the left side, the remote access server over here on the right, and then over here in the network, the infrastructure servers and the application servers that we need to configure as well. But the piece that we're mostly interested in is actually down here, the routing and remote access console, where we can go about configuring these initial VPN settings. That process starts over here by Remote One, where we go through the configure and enable of routing and remote access. This little wizard here allows me to go through and configure the different kinds of ways in which we want to set up this server to support VPN or NAT or VPN and NAT or secure connections between two different networks. Let's begin with something very simple, that being a VPN connection here. By configuring this VPN connection, I can choose either a VPN or a dial-up connection, the latter of which being a server that has one or more modems attached to it so that users can connect in through a modem connection. A VPN connection here essentially sets the server up as a VPN gateway so that incoming clients can connect to the server and then have their communication then handed off securely into the inside resources. I'll choose Next here, and then we can identify then which of the two network interfaces we want that will connect this server to the internet. Now, when we made that configuration, we set this up with the OneNet being as our simulated access to the internet. We did this mainly because using VMware Workstation, this is probably one of the easiest configurations that you can make. In a production world, you would have an internet accessible IP address, one that plugs into another network card on that machine, that you would configure here as the network interface connecting this server to the internet. When you're making that connection, you have the option down here of enabling security on that selected interface by setting up what are called static packet filters, which essentially locks down that communication to the kinds of communication you want to control from your incoming clients. If I choose Next here, we can identify how we want to provide IP addresses for the incoming clients that attach to this VPN server. Now, the easiest way to do this is the automatically way up here at the top, because this server here will just simply use a DHCP server to assign those addresses. If you don't, you'll need to provide a specified range of addresses for those users to come in. If you are choosing to use DHCP, recognize that RRAS will actually request bundles of, I believe, 10 addresses at a time that it can use and hand out to these incoming clients as they make connections. So when you configure your DHCP server, make sure that you have enough addresses so that the RRAS server can grab those bundles of 10 addresses at a time based off of the number of clients you anticipate connecting at any single point in time. I'll choose automatically here to use those DHCP addresses. In our next screen here, we have the option of choosing whether or not this RRAS server will use a radius server, or what is called in Windows a network policy server, as the mechanism for authenticating these connection requests. Now, you have a couple of different options here. Number one, you can allow the RRAS server to do the authentication all by itself. Or number two, you can use that radius server as a second internal machine to provide that authentication for you. Using Radius is good for a couple different reasons. Number one, it's inside, so it's a little bit more protected than using RRAS itself. So you can move the authentication and the authentication database content away from your edge network. Number two, if you have more than one RRAS server, which is a common configuration if you need high availability or to spread out the load, a Radius server can connect up to multiple RRAS servers and really multiple different kinds of VPN servers to provide that authentication in a single location. We'll actually talk more about Radius and the Network Policy Server in an upcoming course, all the way at the end of this whole learning path. So for now, let's just configure our RRAS server to all by itself authenticate those connection requests, and we'll add that Radius server in just a little bit later. I'll choose Next here, and Finish to go about completing the RRAS server setup wizard. Now notice here the little error message that pops up, or really a reminder message that pops up, reminding us that in order to be able to support the use of DHCP across a different subnet, recall that our DHCP server is providing addresses on the 0net, we will need to incorporate a DHCP relay agent, which is an additional service that allows DHCP requests and then the resulting IP addresses to make their way across those subnets. In many cases, DHCP will not allow the request and response activity to occur across subnets, and so it's the use of a DHCP relay agent and the opening of the appropriate ports that allows that communication to occur as we go from the 0net to the 1net and potentially back. I'll click OK here to accept this, and we'll talk more about the DHCP relay agent here coming up in just a second. Once this process completes, you can see that routing and remote access is now configured here on this server, and this server can be used as a VPN server for incoming clients.